Hi, everybody. I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of some Facebook analytics as I was looking over your analytics reports and your audience analysis. Some of you did a really good job of digging into your analytics, and others of you didn't dig as far as you probably could have. So I just wanted to highlight some places that you can get this information. Keep in mind that most of these platforms have some element of this. So Twitter has this, Instagram has some, Facebook has some. I'm just going to show you on Facebook right now, just to distinguish between two different aspects of Facebook, since almost everybody is including Facebook into their strategies. So let's take a look at what the differences are, okay? So remember, there are the Facebook groups, and then there's also Facebook pages. And Facebook pages were really popular, and they still are, and I encourage most businesses to have them. What you want to do is think about it like a website. You basically should have a Facebook presence of some sort, and you want to make sure that you're posting on there. You can think of this like your website as your space. So it should be content that's driven by you, that your community may want to know about. But Facebook itself is trying to push everyone into groups, which are more self-selected. So you're not just saying, oh, I like this brand. You're going a step further to saying, I want to engage with this brand. And I think that analogy is very useful for you as you're developing your brands and your strategies to say, oh, how can we create something connected to our brand that may be sponsored by our brand, but takes it in a slightly different direction? So if I were a photography company, what I might want to do is consider a photo hobbyist group where people share photo tips, right? So this is actually an offshoot of my SGF news page because I figured people would want to discuss and engage about what's going on with COVID-19. So that becomes a little more useful, and it also levels the playing field between you as the brand and your community. It allows your community to participate. One of the things that you'll want to do, as you would do with your comments on your website, you want to set some ground rules for what the discussion should be. So you should dictate, oh, no commercial messages or advertising, no profanity, no insults. Set and model the behavior that you want so that people will engage in that way. I often will talk about, especially when it comes to websites, seeding content. I mean, seeding like seeding plants, right? SEED. So that basically what you're doing is you're giving the audience and the community an idea of what you want them to do so that it might spark ideas on their own to say, oh, that's what they're looking for. Maybe I can engage in that way, and I'll start posting some content in that way. So you really want to model that kind of behavior. So let's take a look at the Facebook page real quickly. So this is the KDrew web page or Facebook page. And so as you look through this content, you can see we have different kinds of posts. And you can look on the posts themselves to get an idea of how many people were reached and how many were engaged. And that gives you an idea typically of what to expect. So on an average week, I will get, on these different posts, I'll get anywhere from 400 to 800 people reached, and about 1/4 to 1/2 of that in terms of engagements. And that's really what I'm looking for. I want people to comment. I want people to have conversation in these spaces. This has dropped over the last 2 years. I used to hit more like 1,300 with people reached. And part of the problem is that Facebook is moving away from organic spread because it wants you to buy ads. I would consider setting aside a portion of your social media budget for doing Facebook ads and Google ads, and experiment with them to see what kind of growth you get. I have seen Facebook ads lead to fairly dramatic growth in the people who like your Facebook page it may not be as successful for helping with your Facebook group. Facebook groups, what I find is the more people that join, the more that it sort of subtly advertises it to those people's networks. So when you get one person to join, their network starts hearing about this particular group, especially if it's set to a public group that anyone can join. Okay, so let's take a look at the analytics. So let's go back to the page. To find the analytics on the page, notice Facebook's user interface is not very intuitive or easy to use. You really have to know where to find stuff. So the thing that we want is we want insights, okay? And the insights are basically their analytics product. And there's two things you want to distinguish on a Facebook page. So you want to look at the page itself. So how many people actually viewed the page and how many people like the page compared to how people viewed the posts. And that's an important distinction because rarely do people go to the page itself. They see the content from the page and they tend to engage with the posts. So page numbers are less important than post numbers. So you really can see how people are engaging with your posts, right? So in this case, my post reach is doing a little bit better. That's more important to me, and I may not care that I'm getting that many likes, right? So then what I want to do is go and look at the posts themselves and get an idea at what the engagement is and how people are doing. So you can see I'm getting kind of an average reach of about 400. And typically the behavior, good typical advice goes, when you have a post on your page, share it in your personal network. You will inevitably get a nice boost because they see it as, oh, you're sharing it with your individual network, not just with the professional audience. And then you can look at post clicks and reactions and comments. Again, as you're analyzing your content, what you want to think about is, what is the behavior that I'm looking for? Is it just that someone looked at it? Did I want them just to react to it or get a particular kind of reaction? Or do I want them to comment? For me, I'm looking for engagement and I want people to request songs. So comments are the most important for me to make sure that I'm getting enough feedback on my particular on my particular show. The thing that I've learned about doing these posts over time is that the ones that are particular to music, so if I ask something specific about what's an artist's best second album, those don't do as well. Those don't do as well as the ones where I do thematic ideas like, give me songs about time. And those do very well. And so I try to tailor my themes to those to maximize engagement. Okay, so that's the Facebook page. So I'm going to look at my content. You also want to see what type of content it is. So do picture posts do better than link posts and that kind of thing. And don't forget, sometimes when you have multiple photos on a post, that can provide multiple opportunities to engage your audience. So all of those are going to be lessons to help you determine what you should be doing for your brand or for your client. Now the Facebook group, let's take a closer look at that. So let's take a look at Facebook groups. Okay, so here's what we've got in this particular Facebook group on COVID-19. So we have a well-defined mission, what we're trying to do, and does that fit with our overall mission? And so that helps us dictate what's going to be here. You want to set some ground rules for your discussion to make sure that people are following the rules of the group, especially if you have it as a public group. So how can we figure out whether we're being very successful? We want to look at individual posts again. So you can look at some group metrics. Members are a little bit more important than likes on a Facebook page because members tend to be more engaged. And once they connect to a group, that content is more likely to appear in their news feed, especially if they're an engaged member. So what you want to do is try and get them engaged with different pieces of content. You can see we had this nice little spike because of you all. Once you joined the group and you started posting things in the group, we saw a pretty good spike in the number of members, because then once it saw that you were engaged, it was advertising that group to people in your network, and that helps grow the network in that way. Um, so that's something you may want to consider as you try to grow your group. The other thing we want to look at is to look at the content itself and see how people are engaging with particular content. This is a slightly different interface than what you'll see on the Facebook page, but there are some similarities. I can see the posts, number of posts, I can see number of comments, I can see where we got the big spike in comments, and I can take a look at that day and try to gauge what was the content that we were posting on that day. This is why it's really important for you to keep track of all of your content by day in a spreadsheet or other similar format. So you can, when you go back and look at your analytics, you can say, oh, what did we post on that particular day? You can go back to your spreadsheet, you can look at that content and say, oh, that's when we posted about X. So this is the one where everybody joined the class, and I had everybody adding posts to the page. So I would have expected a spike in engagement during that period of time. And we see that here too in terms of the active members and what they were doing. I can see that there's a connection between when I post and the popularity of engagement on the site. And then something else you're going to start developing over the next week is this idea of a social media scorecard. So Facebook does its own calculation of top posts, right? So I'm going to highlight two posts. There's the post that Teresa put, right? It has, and it's listed as a top post. So it's got about 13 engagements from the reaction point of view. It's got 10 comments. It's got 6 shares. Okay, that's a very engaging post. It was a short post with to an article, and so that was useful and helpful. So maybe that's something that the audience wants, right? Now, I have this post from Yolanda, and what you see is she's got far more engagement on the likes, and then she has a lot more visibility. So that may be something that we want to be looking at. So which of these posts was more successful? It depends on what we're trying to achieve and what audience we're trying to connect with. Now, if you remember seeing her post was translating the wear your masks sign into Spanish. And so if you're trying to reach, members of a wider community or the Hispanic community, that may be one that you feel like, oh, that's really successful. If you're trying to keep people informed about the current state of our medical situation, then you might consider this a more successful post, even though it wasn't seen by as many people, because maybe you're looking for comments or shares as the most important metric. In that regard, if I'm seeing shares as the way of spreading the message the most, I may look at this post that I posted a few days ago because it got 9 shares. And so even though it didn't get as many likes as this post, it was seen by almost as many people, but didn't have as many, it wasn't seen by as many people and didn't get as many comments on the page, but it got a lot of shares. One other thing you want to do is investigate the shares themselves to see if there is engagement on the shares. So if I look at this, I can see there was on one of the shares, there was some comments that were made, and I might want to investigate to see if this person is an influencer who was commenting and connecting to my piece of content. Similarly, I shared this on my own page and got a few comments in that regard. And so I can look at and see what the conversation is in that space. And there was quite a bit of conversation there. And then there were 2 more shares off of that page. So that's something else that you want to think about is who are the people that are sharing your content? Do you have someone who shares your content regularly? And do they have a large enough following that you want to try and engage them more? You might even want to go to the extent of asking them to create a post. I have done that before in this particular group where someone messaged me and said, "Hey, have you thought about posting some information about this?" And I said, "Would you mind posting it since you know about it?" And they went ahead and did. And that's a good way to increase community engagement because one of the things I post a lot in this group, but I don't want it to be seen as the Jonathan Groves group. I want it to be seen as a group for everyone who's interested in it so that I can get individuals, sharing their information as well, even though I've done the last few posts. But see, that's why I wanted others to feel like it's part of their community as well. Okay, so you always want to be looking for insights. Sometimes they're called analytics in these spaces. See, I'm getting a lot of engagement here on the K Drew on this week's theme for the radio show. But that's the kind of thing you want to look for. And what you want to do is make it iterative. So the learn from your previous content. So when you see that people are engaging with a particular kind of content, really get to the heart of it and see why that happened. The one caution I will give you, just like in our conversation about search engine optimization last week, you can do content that will be really popular and be widely shared that may have nothing to do with your mission. And I don't know that that's going to help build your community in the way that you want. You can get a lot of interactivity and likes on content that's cool or funny or interesting, but it doesn't move you along. The analogy I always use is think of the Super Bowl ads that are really funny and that you're talking about, and then you're like, what brand was that? Right? You watch the video and you're like, that was a really funny ad, but I have no idea who the brand was behind it. To me, that's not a successful ad. And similarly, that's not successful content if you have something that goes viral and people don't remember where it came from or who you are. So make sure that it aligns with your mission and your vision and what you're trying to achieve overall with your strategy. Okay, good luck with that, and let me know if you have any questions on how analytics work.